Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and anywhere else you might be seeing this, whether you're viewing live or you're viewing the replay. Welcome to Watercooler Wednesday. Today, we have a real treat. This is a good friend and colleague of mine, Lena Scullard. She is, as you're going to see, really impressive. And I didn't know how impressive until I was reading some of her bio, and I'm just like, you may be the most eclectic person we've ever had on here before. I think that might be fair to say.
I will take that as a compliment.
But Lena is joining us today. It is totally a compliment. Lena is joining us today. She is a professional speaker. Lena inspires audiences to expand their awareness and embrace the benefits of personal accountability so they can get better results in their work, their relationships, and generally in their life. Lena's expertise includes personal and interpersonal skills development, which she believes are the foundations of effectiveness for both individuals and teams. Here's the eclectic part. Lena is also, I believe, only our second moonlighting DJ to ever be on the Watercooler. I think Amber Fields is also a past guest. And I think only our second, like, semi-pro, I don't know how you would describe it, poker player. Well, you said you play poker. Is that
bar poker?
Bar poker. So not
casual.
Okay. So maybe you shouldn't go up against Steve Fredland, who is a past guest and also a friend of Lena's. But that's pretty impressive that you play poker as well and win sometimes, right?
Yes.
Lena
often.
Often. That's pretty
Often.
impressive. Okay, maybe we do have to set that up. Lena holds her degrees in theater and English literature. Anytime I need something to be sort of checked over, I like to send it to Lena, but I'm also scared to send it to Lena. Anybody who's heard me talk about the difference between being nice and being kind, Lena is extremely kind and will give you honest feedback. And so it is invaluable to get Lena's feedback. She's the youth program director for her church and regularly leads worship service. She's won 2 karaoke contests, a talent show, several local bar poker tournaments. And next up, you may find her on the competitive circuit with Toastmasters International. She remains active in community theater, moonlights as a DJ, and loves adventures and new experiences. Lena grew up in rural Minnesota, surrounded by a supportive family despite her crazy dreams and pursuits. At the age of 8, Lena was diagnosed with type 1 juvenile diabetes, which brought her strength and steadiness, despite hardships and tough life lessons that she often shares with her audiences. Lena lives in Minnesota with her husband and spunky dog, Moxie. Cool. Welcome, Lena.
It's like me in a nutshell. Thank you, David.
That's more than a nutshell. And really, Lena only gave me those like first 2 things about her professionally as like the bio, and then I always ask, tell us something interesting about you. And very often I see that people clearly struggled with that part. Lena had a whole separate bio with the interesting parts. So that's really cool. I think we need to have you for a follow-up conversation to talk about like just going and finding, like following your dreams and whatnot. I think that's really cool that you've taken on all these really cool things and have accomplished so much.
Thank you.
Yes. That is not the topic for today. Today, we're talking about taking the wheel, holding yourself accountable for better results. So Before we get into the meat of this, first of all, if you are viewing us live, definitely put something in the chat. This is designed to be a live conversation around the water cooler, where you all have the ability to add your questions and comments as we go. If you're watching the replay, that pertains to you too. We'll continue to monitor the chats on whichever platform you're viewing this and continue to engage with you on there. But I warned you, Lena, that first comes first, the 6 and 60. So on the water cooler, we do the 6 and 60. It's 6 rapid fire questions. You have 60 seconds to answer all of the questions. So not
Okay.
each individual question.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Short, clear, concise. I'm ready.
All right. What is one thing that you would like to see stick around after this pandemic is all said and done?
Remote work and flexible work options, and employers thinking outside of the box on how they can provide that to their team members.
When you're feeling overwhelmed or burned out, what do you do to reset and recharge?
Quiet time for reflection to think through my Stitch It Up mantra, which I think we'll talk about a little bit today.
You're a 2-time karaoke champion and moonlight as a DJ. What's your theme song?
Higher Ground by the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Okay, that's cool. Awesome. Give us one notable trait of your favorite boss of all time.
Incredibly trusting and empowering. Take your idea, follow your idea, I'll support your idea.
That's beautiful. Give us the best piece of advice or wisdom you've ever received.
Ah!
Out of time, but you still have to answer them.
No, that was the one that was going to get me.
Yeah, you haven't heard the last one yet.
Oh, gosh, I thought I was on the last one. Okay, but time's up, right? Or do you still want me to try to answer?
We still want that answer.
Oh, gosh. The best piece of advice that someone's ever given me. I quote Maya Angelou all the time to other people, and I think it's because it's resonated with me so much. Do the best you can with what you know. Until you know better, then do better.
I love that. That's like in the theme of like constant improvement. I love that. Okay, last question, just because it's there. It's an easy softball of a question. It shouldn't take you long to answer. In 5 words or less, what's the meaning of life? See, that's the gotcha question.
I really like the expression to leave it better than we found it. I don't know if that's 5 words or less, but to leave the world better than we found it.
I'm horrible at math, but I think it sounded very close to 5 words or less. Great job. You got four easy, and those last 2 were really solid answers. So we'll give it to you.
Okay.
So Lena, I like to start these things by asking about our guest's origin story. Right, we're a big superhero Marvel family here, and everybody knows the best superhero movie is the one where they first introduce the character, and we get to see how they gain that superpower, how they became who they are. So, how did you gain your superpowers? How did you become a speaker and somebody who specifically focuses on things such as personal accountability? You have more than 60 seconds for this one, by the way.
No, but I think I can answer this one really easily because I think everything that I do and pursue kind of traces back to how I became the strong person that I am. And in order to become the strong person that I am, I went through, I think, a few different periods of weakness in my life in different areas. I do think a lot of it traces back to having type 1 diabetes as a child. I had to learn this idea of accountability a lot earlier than a lot of other kids did. I mean, we're always taught this concept of, actions and consequences, right? And cause and effect. But when you are trying to manage an illness like diabetes, every single choice and every single thing you do every day has a fairly immediate consequence, and it also has long-term consequence. So having to really understand that if I go play with my friends on the playground, that's going to impact my blood sugar and I'm going to have a consequence for that later on, right? Or if I choose to eat this candy bar that I'm not supposed to, that's going to have a consequence later on. And I think because I was 8 years old when I was diagnosed, when I went back to school, I also suddenly became the weird kid to some. I became the privileged kid that got special snack time and had, cafeteria access in the middle of the day, and had a candy stash in the teacher's desk, right? I also became the kid that didn't get invited to sleepovers because parents were
Mm.
afraid that they would kill me overnight for
Huh.
some reason. So not only did I learn about cause and effect and choices and consequences from that, but it also had an impact on my identity. And I felt like I was bullied a little bit. It definitely shook my confidence in the long run. Not being able to go on school trips or not, just those little things that cause you to feel like you're different from everyone else. And I think everybody goes through a period, right, where they just want to fit in with everyone. um, but going through, adolescence and the teenage years kind of with that lowered self-esteem created different battles that I had to fight well into my adulthood. And when I got into corporate training and I got to start facilitating these courses centered around cognitive and behavioral psychology and this idea that we are what we think, and the things that we focus on are the things that we get back from the universe. I'm a big believer in self-fulfilling prophecy, but that we can control that. And I'm a big believer in what you expect is most often what you get. So that's my origin story. I feel like is it started with being type 1 diabetic, and then the challenges that presented to me throughout my life, I had to learn how to overcome them.
Right. I
That's my origin story. And so now the reason that I became a speaker is because I definitely have seen, I've witnessed firsthand how taking personal accountability and understanding that the choices that I make every day lead to a specific set of results, and that we can have an impact. If we don't like what we're getting out of life, then we have to change. We have to do something different. And
Mhm.
I truly, truly believe that. So the reason, I guess, to end my origin story that I started speaking is because I've been in a place where I didn't feel strong and I felt weak and I wanted to blame the rest of the world and be the victim. And then I made a choice to change that mindset to I control the outcomes that I have in my life, and the benefit, like the personal benefit and the amount of empowerment you feel when you can own that personal accountability and be able to say, you know what, things didn't go my way, and it's because I did or didn't do this. And tomorrow I'm going to do this instead. So I get something better and something different is such a powerful way to wake up every day. And that's why I speak.
Oh, I love that. That's so powerful. I agree with you, Alicia. Thanks for that comment. Um, so I guess in your story, I'm trying to figure out for your personal experience, did the emphasis on personal accountability build out of a sense that you couldn't count on other people, that you basically needed to be, um, that you didn't have that safety net, so you had to be accountable for yourself? Or conversely, was there the support system and the safety net that allowed you to hold yourself personally accountable? Because isn't there an element of vulnerability when we practice personal accountability? Don't we need something that's gonna catch us if we need to know that there are people that will love us no matter how badly we may have screwed up. So, in other words, the sense of support or not having the support, how did that play into uh, your path?
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective. And I'm kind of processing that as you're asking me, because I will be the first one to tell you how lucky and how fortunate I know that I was to have a very strong support system, right, growing up. Um, One of the stories that I tell in my Stitch It Up program is about coming home from the hospital after my diagnosis and my mom finding me crying on the floor. And I told her that I didn't understand why this was happening to me, and I didn't want it. I wanted her to take it away, make it better. Like, I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to be diabetic. I wanted her to make it stop. And she sat down on the bathroom floor with me, and she said, "Lena, I don't know why this happened to you. We don't know, but it happened, and I can't make it go away, and I'm sorry for that. But I'm going to make you this deal. All we're going to be able to do is the best we can every day. So we're going to cry about it for 10 more minutes, and we're going to cry really hard, and then we're never going to cry about it again."
Hmm.
And I have used that emotional process, I think, multiple times in my life, creating room to acknowledge and deal with the emotions of life. I don't believe in ignoring our emotions. I don't believe in positive, toxic positivity. I don't think those things help. I think our emotions are very real, and we have to acknowledge them and get them out and figure out why and process them. So, to answer your question about that support system, I feel like I would be remiss if I said that didn't play a part in my ability to develop this strong accountability practice. But also at the same time, as I've taught these concepts for the last decade, I've seen people who don't have that strong support system embrace this idea regardless. And so I do think we are so much stronger than we give ourselves credit for. And learning to take accountability and learning to admit failure and admit limitation and take ownership of our failure to act, or all of those things, they can be really hard. But I think when we understand that we are stronger than we give ourselves credit for, we can be accountable for those hard things and come out feeling stronger rather than being too hard on ourselves. I was actually just talking to my sister about this right before this call. She is a mother of 5 toddlers.
Hmm.
She has 2 sets of twins, 5 kids under 5.
Wow.
And she was beating herself up about all of the things that she didn't get done in her own small business.
Hmm.
And so we had a very real conversation about giving ourselves grace and not pushing ourselves too hard.
Yeah.
I think is also important. As we're practicing accountability, we have to understand where we want to make different choices and take that ownership, but we also have to be able to give ourselves grace, because we are all human and we do all make mistakes.
I I
I
love
have
that
no idea if I answered your question, but I'm
you
going to end
did.
it there.
You did, and all these new questions are popping up in my head. So one of the things that I really want to tackle is precisely what you just talked about with your sister. In my experience, extremes of anything are dangerous. And the question is, and you sort of spoke to this a little bit, is what does the extreme of accountability, personal accountability, what does that, what's the impact of that in a negative way at the extreme? Is that inherently related to things like perfectionism or self being self-critical? Is it inherently linked to that, or am I thinking about this a little bit differently? And before you answer that, Alicia brought up a good point that you were talking about taking accountability um, for your diabetes, which you didn't do to you, right? And so there is that. I would think um, potential like caution against taking responsibility for things that are not your fault. But then on the other side, one of my favorite things to say to leaders is just because something isn't your fault doesn't mean it's not your problem, right? And so we need to be able to take responsibility for things even when we don't feel like taking the blame. So my question is kind of what does that look like? What are the warning signs that maybe you should step back from that cliff on taking accountability too far?
Yeah, there's a lot there to unpack. So my first question would be, what positive outcome has blame ever served anybody?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a
So
great
I
question.
don't think accountability is about assigning blame to yourself, to someone. I don't think that's not what I focus on anyway with accountability. And one of the concepts that I teach with this is the idea of acceptance, right? And this is not a new concept, that we tend to worry and put far too much energy into things we cannot control,
Mm-hmm.
right? So being diabetic, for example, one of my favorite expressions came from the TV show House. He said, "Kidneys don't wear a watch." All right. And that has
Mm-hmm.
stuck with me for a really long time, because mistakes that I made as a teenager in my early 20s, trust me, I drank, I tried things, right? Mistakes that I made in my 20s could come back to haunt me next week, a month from now, 10 years from now, right? But if I spend all of my energy worrying about the diabetic complications that may or may not come at me one day, then I waste a lot of energy that I could be putting toward other things that are important to me in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So while I focus on what I can do every day, I don't let myself worry about the things that are outside of my control. So we hear this concept a lot, right? That we have to start letting go of the things we cannot control. But I think the harder part of that is the other side of the coin. And that is, we have to start taking control of the things that we do have control over.
Mm-hmm.
We have to take ownership. And I teach people in the entire universe of things that we worry about, there are only two things that are 100% in our control. And that is our conscious thoughts and our actions. And that to me is accountability. So, regardless of whose fault it is or why today's circumstances happened, whether it was my fault or your fault or society's fault or the economy's fault, or right now in this moment, you have control over how you choose to think about what's happening around you and to you, and you have control over what you will actually do. And those are the two things that are harder sometimes to take ownership of, because sometimes we just would, it's easier to blame and it's easier to be the victim and it's easier to do nothing than it is to say, you know what, this is one thing I can do today that I can confidently say will have a positive impact on tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. That so you're talking a lot about um, you've mentioned a couple times the short term gain or loss, but then also into the future. And into the future is hard, like that deferred gratification or the opposite. That's really hard to grasp. So how did somebody because when I make excuses or push the blame somewhere else or don't take accountability for things, it's typically to escape that short term discomfort, right? But
Sure.
so how do I convince myself to sort of it's kind of like the marshmallow test, to have that deferred gratification, to trust that I need to take accountability now, otherwise this is going to be more painful down the road. Is there a trick to that?
I think it's recognizing the discomfort for what it is, and that's temporary, right? And being able to recognize those moments, and our subconscious negative thoughts can be really hard to combat, especially if we haven't built up healthy mental habits of allowing our conscious thoughts to do battle, right, with our subconscious thoughts, and catching ourselves when we're in those moments of I need this right now, or I'm in a place where I'm not feeling good about myself, so my ego needs me to deflect that somewhere else, and being able to recognize those moments and then tell ourselves, no, that's not what's happening. And practicing those positive affirmations and being able to say, you are stronger than you think, you are capable, right? You can make a better choice than you originally would have. What do you want to come out of this particular circumstance, and what are you going to do about it? And then making that step. But it's hard, and it's I always talk about it in terms of, if you're going to walk into a gym to get in shape, and that's not something that you're used to doing, you're not going to just go in and deadlift 500 pounds.
Right.
So it's one of those things that you do really have to start small, and just start with, when you get up in the morning, rather than thinking about how you want to change your entire life so that you're in a different place 5 years from now. That's heavy lifting,
Mm,
right? Instead, wake up in the morning and ask yourself, how do I want the end of today to be different, to feel different than the end of yesterday?
mm,
And what are 2 or 3 things that I can look at differently, think differently, do differently, that I can predict will make me feel better at the end of the day? It might be having a cup of coffee with a friend. It might be making that phone call to that family member you haven't talked to in a while. It might be reading your kids a book before they go to sleep. Whatever that is for you, I think small lifting is how we build the habit, right? And when we start to build that habit and we start to see that, okay, these small efforts of accountability are having an impact on the results I'm getting, then we can start to do heavier lifting, right?
mm. Yeah. Yeah. So start with the small wins. I love that. I love that concept. So here's the counterpoint.
Okay, we
You
have it.
you are active in the church. I grew
I
up
am.
in an Orthodox Jewish community, and within the religious community, I don't know how many books have been written with some sort of twist on why do bad things happen to good people. And there are these times in our lives where we do we create the cause and we're ready for the effect, and we think, if I do this, then good things will come, and we're setting ourselves up for the small win, but then it doesn't. And then you roll into this thing. And a lot of what we're talking about within psychology, as you know, we talk a lot about locus of control, right? So
Mm-hmm.
am I externalizing all of this, or am I internalizing it? Am I recognizing my control over my own destiny? But what happens when you start packing on those losses and you're trying to create that momentum? I start going to the gym and I get on the scale the next day and my weight is up. And then the next day too. So I'm not seeing the wins. Then I start to go down this learned helplessness path, and which is, a direct route toward clinical depression oftentimes, right? How do I get myself off of that road, and how do I set myself up for success?
Um, so for me, I think it's understanding that not every decision that I make and predict an outcome is going to have the outcome I expect it to.
Mm-hmm.
So mistakes will be made, and that's, I think, part of accountability is, again, having that grace, right, to say, okay, so that was the decision I made, didn't quite get what I thought I was going to get out of it, what else can we try, right? And sometimes that also means, what else do I need to learn? And I love that you use the you know going to the gym, stepping on the scale analogy, because I've dealt with this a lot throughout my life as a diabetic growing up. It was breakfast, morning snack, lunch, afternoon snack, dinner, bedtime snack. constant. And so I kind of have a little bit of a weird relationship, I think, with food and eating habits
Mm.
anyway. And then there is that, like, if I do this, right, if I walk an hour, I should see this result, right?
Right.
And when that didn't happen, and you try this diet and it doesn't happen, and you try that diet, and then you go learn, right? Like, I'm going to go try to learn about how I'm not getting the results and why,
Mm.
what I might be doing wrong. And being willing to be kind enough to yourself to say, oh, that didn't work. I need to do something different, right? Because if we keep doing the same thing over and over, right, expecting the same result,
Right. Insanity.
right, insanity. Um, there's also, I wanted to go back to what you were talking about. You kind of opened up a little bit of a spiritual window there with that concept of good things, bad things happening to good people, right? And so one of my favorite analogies with that is to ask someone, and I was just going to see if I have uh, a container here. Okay. These are not the typical containers that I would use for this, but if I asked you, whoops, sorry, let me shift. If I asked you which of these containers you would prefer to have to hold your capacity for joy, which container would you choose?
The big one.
The big one. What if I told you that the capacity of the container is created through your experience with pain?
Hmm. Gotcha.
The people in this world who have experienced the greatest amount of pain and disappointment and injustice have the biggest capacity for experiencing love and joy.
Hmm.
And that is because they relate directly to each other. If we've never experienced one, we can't really understand the other. And that's always my explanation for why there tends to be so much hard things and painful things and injustice in the world. Is I think that it's part of this the spiritual journey
Hmm.
that we just go through as human beings as part of that experience.
Wow. I knew you'd have a good answer for that because besides for the secular crowds you speak to, you also run youth programs and things, right? So
I
I mean,
do.
that's powerful. That's really powerful. Thank you for that. Okay, can you share with us? I know, I've been waiting for this. Can you share with us your Stitch It Up model? What does that look like?
Yes, I can. So my Stitch It Up motto was born out of that 10 minutes with my mom on the bathroom floor, right?
Hmm.
Where she said, we're going to cry about it for 10 more minutes, and then we're never going to cry about it again. And then later on, as I was learning more about cognitive and behavioral psychology, I was introduced to Viktor Frankl, the
Hmm.
psychiatrist who survived the Nazi concentration camps. And he went on to write about a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And in that book, he described what he observed is the greatest human freedom. And he said, between stimulus and response, we have a space, right? And in that space is our greatest human freedom. And that's our freedom to choose how we think about what's happening to us and how we behave and what we choose to do about what's happening to us. And I saw a direct correlation, right, between what he was talking about and that experience that I had at that very young age. I was 8 years old with my mom. And people would always tell me, Lena, you don't let things get to you. Like, change happens and bad things happen and stressful things happen. And you just have this ability to take a deep breath and roll with it. And so they would ask me how I do that. And that's really why I came up with the Stitch It Up mantra. That is literally what I do when I feel any kind of negative stress response. It could be Thursday night, I made my first trip to Des Moines, and 13 miles from Des Moines, my car started violently shaking down the road.
Huh.
Um, so immediately, right, stress response, deep breath. I stretch the space and I stitch it up. And what happens when you stitch it up is you apply 4 mental stitches. Think about it like if you cut your finger, you don't just go around bleeding everywhere, right? Until it
Mhm.
stops. You go take care of it. And that's kind of how I think about these 4 mental stitches. You take a space to take a breath and think through first awareness. What is causing this stress response? And is it warranted? Because sometimes our past and our life history causes our brain to trigger emotions and feelings that actually don't really apply to our current situation.
Mhm.
And we let ourselves get stressed out about it anyway. So that first step is just awareness. Why am I feeling this way? Is that the way I should be feeling, right? Is there another way I could choose to look at this, right? And then you go to acceptance. That's the second stitch. So, what am I worried about that I have no control over? I'm going to let that go, right? And then, what are the 2 things I can do? What can I do right now in this situation? The third stitch is attitude. And that's where you choose how you're going to think about what's happening, how you're going to think about how you're feeling.
Mhm.
And I like to put it into one of 3 categories. You can laugh about it because life is funny and it feels good to laugh. You can choose to heal, and that usually happens when it's other people involved. Like, I'm going to choose to not let their behavior toward me impact my future. I'm going to forgive and I'm going to heal.
Mhm.
And then you can focus, right? Football coaches, I've heard, will yell "stitch it up" as a metaphor for, get your head in the game.
Huh.
You've got this. We've practiced this, right? And so it's that idea of narrowing in and focusing. And then, of course, the fourth A is accountability, because that's really kind of the foundation and the outcome that I always seek is, what am I going to do right now? And being very aware and intentional about what that is.
That's great. So awareness and then acceptance,
Acceptance,
right? And then the third one is accountability,
attitude,
attitude,
attitude, and
attitude,
then
and then
accountability.
accountability. I love
Yes.
that. And you spoke about how we can face it with humor or switch our focus, or what was the third one?
Heal.
Or heal. I love that. Love that
Choose to
model.
heal.
Yeah. And this, you learned this as a kid.
I learned a large portion of this as a kid, yeah. And so I think I took a lot of those lessons and those things that I had to figure out just to get through my day to day, looking with hope. It's
Mm,
one of the things that I talk about. I do believe toxic positivity is a thing, but optimism is very different from positivity,
hmm.
right? So often when we're trying to be positive, we can push back or ignore the crappy things in life, right?
Hmm.
And we just kind of ignore them and choose to see the sunshine and the rainbows. And I think that can be toxic when we do that, because we're not addressing those harder things in life. And I think they do deserve our attention. When
Right.
we have optimism, it means that we can acknowledge that those things are happening, those hard things are happening right now, but we have hope that tomorrow will be better. And so, yes, a stitch it up attitude is really about the optimism and having that hope for better tomorrow, whether that's from laughing, healing, or applying our focus.
Very much like your mother telling you, let's cry for 10 minutes. That's not
Yes,
toxic positivity. That's embracing the pain and then
yes.
saying, now what do we do?
And being
Where do we
willing to
go from
sit with
here?
it for a while,
Hmm.
but give yourself a time limit. And that space, right, that Viktor Frankl talked about, how much you take is really up to you, right? So whether you want to take 5 seconds or you want to take 10 minutes or 2 weeks, whatever that is, I do think it's important that we sit with our emotions, that we acknowledge them and process them and understand them instead of just feeling ashamed about them or ignoring them.
This is this is all really powerful and really useful for somebody to take accountability for themselves. Does it get a lot trickier when we want to have other people take accountability for themselves. For instance, a leader in an organization wants their teams to take personal accountability. Now we are asking others to do this as opposed to us doing this on our own. How do we build organizations and teams that embrace personal accountability as a value, but also like actually empower this and create cultures that allow that to take place?
I'm so glad that you asked that question, right? Because uh, I kind of, in a way, lied a little bit when I said there's only two things in this whole world that you have control over, right? And it is true. There's only two things that you have complete control over, and we absolutely cannot force other people to be accountable, right? And we especially can't do it through tactics like shame and negative consequences, and right, oftentimes I see that as kind of a tactic that leaders will use. You know, you're letting down the team, you're going to put somebody in danger, right? We use all of these kind of scare tactics to try to push someone to be motivated, to be accountable, and I don't think that's the right way to do it. When I talk about acceptance and those two things you have control over,
Mhm.
that's in the moment. But by taking control of our thoughts and our actions, we can in fact expand a third circle, and that is our circle of influence, right?
Mhm.
And that's our ability to speak to people in a way that influences the way they feel about themselves and the decisions they make. So while we can't force other people to be accountable, we can improve our influence with them through our communication skills and through our leadership skills. And that's one of the reasons why I talk about leadership, is because leaders do have this incredible ability to speak to someone in a way that can change their mind, can spark. And I've been through that myself. Right out of college with a theater degree, I couldn't get a job. Imagine my disappointment.
Huh.
But as a millennial, I was told if you get a college degree, you will have a successful career. I was told that, like, as a guarantee. And when it didn't come true, I got a huge chip on my shoulder. And I was very angry at the entire world for lying to me about the pursuit of education and the payoff. And it wasn't happening. And I luckily had leaders. I had some leaders that wanted me fired from my job because my attitude was so poor. And they very clearly told me that they wanted me fired. But then I had another set of leaders that were able to talk to me in a way that helped me understand, what do I want, right? What do I want for myself, not only in the short term, but in the long term? And I'm talking beyond just career and a paycheck. Like, what do you want for yourself? What do you want for your life? What do you want your legacy and your impact to be,
Mhm.
right? And then what are those skills and talents and passions that you have that you can use to help you have that impact? And I think that's where I like to encourage organizations. When I talk about leadership, I actually talk about Maslow's hierarchy.
Mhm.
Because if we want a team member to stop quiet quitting and do more and be more, and they don't feel psychologically safe coming to work every day, they can't get there. There's a progression that we go through in our basic human needs that I think our leaders can either nurture or take us down a peg. So in terms of helping your team be accountable in an organization, I think it's making a change in how we view our team members that aren't performing.
Yeah.
And rather than viewing them as a problem to be corrected, to view them as someone we need to figure out what they want. And we need to figure out how their place in this organization can help them get there, and then connect the dots for them on how their effort to benefit themselves also benefits us as an organization.
So you talked about psychological safety. Is it important for us as leaders to make it safe to fail, or am I totally not getting the point? Because the point of accountability is that we hold ourselves responsible for failure. So where's that? What is that? What does that look like? The accountability that we hold each other to, versus the type of organization that makes it safe to fail. Some organizations celebrate failure. What does that look like? Is that a hippy dippy concept to make it safe to fail, etc., and celebrate failure, or is that what's needed?
Sure. So I think it's important to clarify that when I talk about accountability, I am not talking about paying a consequence. I'm not talking about discipline. I'm not talking about um, paying for your mistakes. Accountability is about being confident enough and strong enough to say, yes, I made that mistake. Yes, I can see what the impact of that mistake was, and I want to do everything I can do to fix it.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, keep going. I was just thinking about the question about then the idea of making it safe to fail. And 100%, I am a believer. In fact, one of my favorite practices that I've seen a leader do is actually expect their team to fail. And once
Right.
a week, they would have a team meeting and they were expected to report in on something that they failed during that week. Because
Mm.
if we aren't failing, it means we're not trying anything new and we're not taking risk, right? And so I think that's another small place where we can like make small weight lifts, small workouts
Hmm.
in terms of failing so that we can get used to that feeling, right? I think so many of us associate failure with these feelings of negativity
Mm.
and blame and self-doubt and
Shame.
shame. And that does not have to be the way you continue to feel. I think you have to recognize again those subconscious thoughts and those feelings that happen when we do that, and then be able to again do battle with our subconscious and say, no, actually, I did make that mistake. I did fail, but here's what I can learn from it so that the next time I know more than I did before, right? So going back to Maya Angelou's quote, mistakes are opportunities to learn. And I think that's a leader's responsibility. First of all, don't set your people up to fail because that will destroy psychological safety. But instead, challenge them to be willing to try something new to get a different result and then be there to support them. And I don't mean support them in telling them that failure was okay, but to support them in telling them, okay, you failed, what did you learn? Right? And
Hmm.
coach them through that process so that they don't make the same mistake again and are able to do something better and different in the future. I think I answered the question.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that answer. I love that answer. When we talk about accountability, there is this a little bit of like discomfort that could come up with people, where accountability, and especially in the sense that we are telling people to hold themselves accountable, and especially the sense where we start telling other people that people to hold other people accountable, the question of equity kind of comes up in terms of accountability sounds sometimes in line with like pull yourself up by the bootstraps, right? And it's people are facing a lot of different types of challenges. So who is it who gets to I guess identify like where accountability should be held, or the expectations generally, or uh, I guess how do we avoid passing judgment and recognize equity issues between people and between peoples, while also encouraging an atmosphere of accountability?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think to go back to the idea of holding other people accountable, I don't I don't know if I really believe that that's something that anybody can truly do. I think you can provide consequences to somebody's actions,
Hmm.
but I don't know if that really makes them accountable, right? Other than knowing that those are going to be the consequences if I do it again,
Mm.
that I'm not going to do it again, right? So I guess in terms of that process, I would have to dig into that a little bit more. In terms of the personal accountability piece, and especially the pull yourself up by the bootstraps expression,
Right.
I am very much a pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and I kind of grew up that way.
Hmm.
But with that space, right? Because often when we tell someone, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, what are you crying for? Get over it. We're basically negating the emotions, right? We're negating the obstacle and the struggle. We're telling people to just get over it. And that I don't think is healthy.
Mm.
So allowing people, and I think that's one of the things that really could help us come a long way in some of these conversations that we are having with social issues and DEI and things like that, is just making room and creating space where we can try to understand the emotions and the struggles, and validate them, whether what we're feeling is in another person's opinion warranted or not.
Hmm.
I think it doesn't matter because what we're feeling is what we're feeling and it comes from somewhere, right? And we wouldn't be feeling it if it wasn't real.
Right.
So being able to have those conversations with each other, without that, suck it up, get over it, move on, pull yourself up by your bootstraps mentality, I think can be really damaging.
Yeah. And I think it also probably comes full circle to that question about support. And maybe that accountability might do best when it's paired with support. So it's personal accountability, but you've got the team around you to support you with it, which is a lot of what you've spoken about today.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So not necessarily trying to hold each other accountable, but more kind of like what you just said, supporting each other in holding ourselves accountable, right? And being able to have those conversations and ask the questions about, why do you see that the way you see that? And is there another way that you might see it that might change things for you?
Mm.
What have you traditionally done in the past in response when that thing happens? Do you like the result you get when that's your response? Do you want to do something different the next time? Right? I think having those conversations with each other is far more influential in helping somebody change a behavior than any kind of arguing, blaming, shaming, degrading. And we tend to do far too much of that. Judging. Can we just not judge each other anymore? That would be great.
Yeah. Yeah. I would sign up for that. Um, so what are your thoughts? And I know we're running out of time, but on a lot of people talk about accountability partners. What are your thoughts on that? Does that work? Is that an essential thing
It
if you can get that?
Yeah, when I do a workshop, it is not uncommon at the end of that workshop for me to ask attendees to identify an accountability buddy and schedule time, right? I ask people to do these things in this session because if I can get you to pull out whatever calendar tool you use and schedule time with another person to talk about something specific, you are more likely to hold that appointment than if I just tell you at the end, don't forget to find a partner.
Yeah.
So that idea of actionable, I'm very much about action. If you didn't notice,
Yeah.
do
Right.
something or don't do something, but plan it and be intentional about it. So yes, I think accountability partners are incredibly powerful. And it's one of the, I think, most terrible pieces of advice I've heard from goal setting leaders is, you don't have to tell people about your goals. And I
Hmm.
just, that's a little backwards. I want people to know what my goals are so that when I run into them 3 months from now, they're going to ask me about it, and I better have something, some kind of progress to report, right? Like that's part of how I hold myself accountable is I put those goals and achievements and dreams out into the world.
Right. And now the world knows, and it's hard to escape that or hide from it, which is part of what we do when we don't hold ourselves accountable.
Right.
I love that idea. I love that idea. Do you do accountability coaching at all?
I have not traditionally.
Okay,
I
but
have not in the
if
past. Not
somebody's
that
interested in that, they
it's,
should definitely get in touch with you though, because I think
yeah,
that would be
I
great.
would love to even at least, I've been told by many people that I am a good coach. It's just never been something that I've done formally. But part of what drives me though is being able to help people. I have a personal mission statement, and part of that
Cool.
is that I want to empower people to feel confident and capable. So whether I'm doing that with a group or one on one, I think I would get fulfillment from that either way. My sister, I'm my sister's coach all the time.
You've been my coach for in certain circumstances. We're Lena and I are part of a speakers mastermind along with Steve, who's listening in right now. Hi, Steve. Don't look down, but we saw your message.
Eyes on
Um,
the road.
yeah, right. Be safe on your trip to Iowa. Um, but that has been such a value for me, um, that you are really good at not just giving advice, but I want to come back to you and tell you that I accomplished what I said I was going to. There's something about that. So that's pretty great. Um,
Um,
yeah,
can I share one more metaphor with our
please.
listeners? Because I think that is powerful. When you attend things like this, right? Or you go to a conference, or you invest your time in a workshop, or even in a coach, right? I think about it in terms of you have gone through your whole life hammering in nails with a shoe. And when you go to an event like this, or a conference or a webinar, or whatever that is, and you get a hammer, right? So that you can be more effective and more efficient in pounding in the nails in your life. What drives me crazy is that you invested your time and effort to acquire this hammer, and then I see people go back and keep pounding nails with their shoe.
Old
You
habit.
have a hammer now. Why aren't you using your hammer? So, for those of you that are listening, hopefully at least a piece of what we talked about here today can help you have a tool. But don't forget, just because you have the tool, you actually have to use the tool.
Yes, and we you left us with many tools and a different way of looking at um, our own failures, or even if it's not a failure, our own challenges, whether they originated internally or they originated externally. And so the next time I'm faced with one of those things, which give me 5 minutes, um, I'm going to think through the stitch it up mantra: awareness, acceptance, attitude, and accountability. I really love that model, especially because of the piece that you talked about, how so much of this happens non-consciously, and the most powerful thing you can do with so many things, this included, I think, is to pull it up from your non-conscious and address it and think through a model. I think that alone is so incredibly powerful.
And so I think stretching the space is a first step for a lot of people because we as human beings are so reactive. We're so reactive. And so being able to recognize when we're being reactive, and then just like I said, like create that space. Not everything requires an immediate response from you, right? It's okay to excuse yourself from a conversation for 2 minutes. It's okay um, to go have a conversation with yourself in the mirror. It's okay to take a deep breath and think through what you want your next move to be. And I think that's the last thing. I just want to clarify, when I talk about accountability, it really has less to do with what you've done before than most people would think. So it's
Mm,
not about what's happened in the past. It's about where you are right now and what you can think and do to get to where you want to be. Nothing you can do about what's happened in the past.
right.
What are you going to do with what you're given right now?
Start filling that accountability bucket now. I love that. Start right
And
from
let go of all of the mistakes, all of the failures to act, all of the things you didn't do in the past. Let go of that. That doesn't matter. It's done.
right because you talked about the importance of control, right? And
Yep.
that's you're figuring out what's outside of your control and letting that stuff go. I
Yep.
think that's incredibly valuable. Um, oh, hi Nicholas. So
Hi, Nicholas.
so from here, Lena, what? How do we get more Lena in our lives? How do we stay in touch with you? I'm sure people have follow up questions. I'm sure people want to bring you to their office so that they can stop telling everybody you got to hold yourself accountable and you can guide them and lead them there. How does somebody go about doing that? I have that QR code right above your head, leads directly to your website. So they can open up their camera, hover it over there. I can't get to your side. Hover it over there, and that will take you to Lena's website, which you absolutely should check out. But if they want to continue this conversation with you directly, how can they do that?
Oh, incredibly easy. So I am the only Lena Scullard in existence on the internet. So that's cool. Um, so you can find me pretty much on all of the socials. I am even still bearing with Twitter. Not that I'm a huge tweeter, but I am on all the socials at Lena Scullard. No fancy symbols, no numbers, no underscores, just at Lena Scullard. LinkedIn, Facebook are probably where I'm the most active, but I am also starting to be more active on TikTok. Um, and I would love, if you want to continue to have conversation about this in the comments, like David had said, we're going to kind of keep an eye, or if you want to private message me, direct message me for conversation, I would love that. And if you disagree with anything we talked about here today, please reach out, because I love learning about different people's perspectives and where they have challenges with some of the things that I believe are helpful in life. So don't be afraid to start a debate with me either. I don't shy away from that stuff. Discourse is productive, I think.
Absolutely, and thank you for having this conversation with us today. Um, Next week, please tune back in. Not next week, next time. So 2 weeks from now, we're going to be featuring Dr. Eddie Delshad, who is, I hope, self-proclaimed because I'm going to out him otherwise. A self-proclaimed burnt-out dentist, and anybody who's familiar with the dental industry knows that that is way too common. He owned his own dental practice and and really burned out trying to balance the practice management and the dentistry all together. And now he helps other dentists who are looking to either sell their practice or otherwise overcome that burnout and re-engage with what makes them passionate. It's going to be a really cool inside look into an industry that has a lot of people who struggle with things like stress and burnout. So looking forward to that. That's 2 weeks from today. Same time, same channel. Um, so please continue with the comments. We will be watching those. Follow up, connect with Lena, connect with me if we're somehow not already connected. And we will see you next time. Thank you, Lena.
David, thank you. It was a good time.
Absolutely.